Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and today I'm bringing you a special treat. Recently I had the opportunity to play EA and Koei Tecmo's new game, Wild Hearts. This game puts us in the wilderness of feudal Japan, squaring up against massive monsters. When the trailer started hitting Twitter and YouTube, everyone wanted to know more. So today, I have more. Thanks to EA and Koei Tecmo for giving me the opportunity to check it out ahead of that February release date. Now, disclaimer, and I probably don't need to explain this, but the game is currently in development, and so what we're playing here is nowhere close to a finished build. There's quite a few assets and elements that are incomplete or in development, and I'll be largely keeping those out while focusing on the gameplay and game systems. You may also see the occasional frame drop, but it's an in development build, and it handled pretty well for the most part. I only had a few frame drops here and there. So while I can't show you the earliest portions of my experience, I can say that the game opens with a tutorial more akin to your traditional action game than what people might expect for a hunting game. You follow through several paths as the game explains its various systems, slowly introducing you to exploration, crafting, camps, and of course, monsters, small and large. It was a welcome introduction that doesn't slow the pace of the game at all, much to my surprise. However, you eventually come to a section where you can build a camp. The game does allow you to craft actual tents and forges to make a location out in the wilderness that is your actual camp. This helps assert the game's mission to provide more drop-in, drop-out style hunting, giving you the ability to stay out and go after multiple hunts in a row without returning to a central town, something that's very normal in this genre. You can craft and upgrade weapons in your small camp, set specific hunts, or simply go out and explore the map if you want. The session ended before allowing us to head into the main city itself, so I don't have any experience with the actual town to share. You'll just have to stay tuned to find out more about that later. Speaking of exploring, the map itself is probably my favorite thing about this early play session. It's got lush green woods, destroyed cities, hidden caverns, and monster lairs strewn about. You can even find these little buddies named Sukumos that will assist you on your hunts, and the more of them you find, the more you can upgrade the little guys and specialize them to your needs. You can also explore around faster if you master one of the main gimmicks of the game, the karakuri. These are mystical machines that you can build for both combat and exploration purposes. In battle, you could stack boxes to create walls, or create a jump-off point for aerial assaults, put springs down so you can quickly move and dodge attacks, and there's a bunch of other stuff we're probably going to be able to do. For exploring, you can place towers to help track down your prey, the flying vine to traverse over long distances, and even, of course, set up camps in your preferred location. These exploration karakuri can even be used in combat should you desire. I made sure to test if you could hook a flying vine to an enemy, even though they were pretty quick to break them in most cases. I also sometimes just throw boxes down to traverse the map instead of using them in combat, so everything's pretty versatile. To build the karakuri, you need a couple of resources. There's basic materials that can be found from trees or mining points, and even if you stay on the offense, chopped off opponents. These let you make small contraptions like the boxes, and the boxes can be combined to make other contraptions, though we could only make this wall that was able to stop enemies from doing charge attacks. The exploration karakuri, on the other hand, require dragon wells to be found and upgraded around the map. These raise your capacity for placing dragon karakuri down like the flying vine. Much like with the Sukumo, it's worth running around the map finding all of these as early as possible if you have some time, and then upgrading them as you require the materials that you need. Once that's done, you'll be able to set up your karakuri however you want to customize your experience traversing the world. There's still going to be more karakuri in the finished game, but in this, it was all about placing down flying vines, even dropping them on the spot to follow bosses as they were running to their next location. So again, incredibly versatile and fun to mess around with. Curious to see some of the fun contraptions people will come up with in the finished game. Now, there are other reasons to explore the map as well, gathering materials for crafting, finding respawn locations, and building healing wells to replenish your healing waters while out and about. It's a lot of fun thinking about traversing the area, and I can't wait to see what it looks like when I can traverse everything. Now for the actual gameplay. We had 3 main monsters to go up against: Ragetail, Sapscourge, and King Tusk. There was also one more that was part of the tutorial, but I can't show you that because there's a lot of incomplete stuff in that tutorial. Each of them possess what you'd expect: a different moveset, weaknesses on their body, another tail, maybe another specific part depending on the weapon that you're using, and specific gameplay counters. I found I liked different weapons for each one, and that each of them were generally fun to hunt regardless. I will say that the size of the monsters sometimes leads to struggles keeping track of my character, whether that be due to tight spaces and the camera angles, or just finding my view blocked by them from time to time. Some of that was alleviated as I learned to play the game better, so it might just be a skill issue, but I do hope that they are aware of this and continue to improve it in future builds. You can indeed cut off their body parts as most would expect, sometimes big parts like the tails, other times just patches of fur that you can make them drop, that you can of course then go ahead and loot like you would in any other hunting game. However, that's about as close to carving as you'll get, as slaying monsters automatically puts the loot it drops into your inventory after a brief finishing attack. I'm okay with this. I don't really care if I carve the monster or not, I just want to make sure I get everything at the end of a hunt, and this will help ensure that. Now, as for the weapons, I had a choice of 5 weapons. The first that they started me with was the karakuri katana. This is the starting weapon, and it's a really good starting weapon. It has some simple to follow attack chains and tons of branching options for in-the-moment decision making with your combos. By keeping up the offense, you fill your gauge, and then you can extend the katana into more like a karakuri whip, giving it way better range and damage. It hits a ton of times in this unbound state, as it's called in game, and the visuals on your unbound skills are quite satisfying. The second weapon I tried was the bow. This one had 2 different arrows that it could fire, and you had to pick which one you were going to use depending on the situation. First, you would usually start with Haya arrows. These give you better control over your bow so you can dodge and attack more swiftly, while also allowing you to attach fire powder arrows all over the enemy's body. Then you can swap to the Otoya arrows. These are slower, but some of them have piercing properties and also ignite the Haya arrows that are attached to the enemy's body. So you can attach like 15, 20 of those Haya arrows. Then if the opportunity arises, you can swap over to the Otoya ones and then do a massive piercing shot and just bam, 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 explosions all over the enemy's body, breaking things off. Found that really, really satisfying. Each of these bow shots can also be bolstered, opening up rapid fire shots, aerial shots, and deeper piercing shots for more damage. It's a simple but satisfying bow gameplay, especially when you get those massive piercing explosions that just rip through an entire enemy's body. The third weapon I tried was the Nodachi. This is a slow and strong weapon that focuses on building up your gauge by performing attacks while under stance. When the gauge is filled, you can let go of your stance to unleash devastating attacks. While the hits themselves are chunky and satisfying, the slower gameplay just didn't match what I wanted as much, so this one I wasn't a fan of. I like big chunky hits, but the feel just wasn't quite there for me. The fourth weapon I tried was the hammer. Now, classically in games in this genre, the hammer is my go-to, and I'm kind of on the fence about it in this game. It does have big chunky hits, and it's a little more mobile than I was expecting it to be. But it's not just your traditional hammer. It extends, it's a little bit more rubbery, and while it has those big hits, I feel like it focuses a little bit more on the mobility aspect of the hammer than it does on the big chunky hits. Probably my favorite thing about it is its basic triangle attack. It's just this lunge forward and slam on the head. I was tempted to just spam that over and over, but one of the other attacks is just a constant spinning attack over and over and over, and the longer that you hold it, the stronger the hammer gets, and then it starts to extend out. So these attacks are satisfying, but I felt that the hammer was a little too slidey. It was really hard for me to get the exact hits that I wanted, and when I get these big hammer hits, I do want some degree of precision. But again, could have just been a skill issue. I didn't have a whole lot of time to play it. That's just how it felt after a few hunts of using it. And the final weapon that I got to try was the bladed wagasa. This is an umbrella that has blades on the end of it. I think this might have been my favorite weapon of the 5, and normally I'm not into the super fast, super mobile weapons. I kind of like that grounded big hit feel. But when the Nodachi didn't do it for me and the hammer only kind of did it for me, and then I tried this, this really, really felt like a fun weapon. You can zip around so much, you hit so fast, you can get into the air, you can get out of the air. There's just so many ways to approach this weapon, and you have a parry. And the parry's kind of forgiving. I'm not super great at parrying, but even I was able to pull off quite a few. So in the middle of your combo chains, you see an attack coming, bam, you hit the parry, you get right back into it with the counter attack, the follow-up attacks. It's really, really satisfying. Not to mention that the more you stay on the offensive, you actually build gauge and your weapon starts getting more hits, dealing more damage, and it's a very visceral feeling weapon once you get it to that point. When you go after the body parts and you really chip away at them, oh, this is the one. I think I need to see the rest of the weapons because we obviously didn't get to use every weapon that's going to be in the game. But of these 5, this one I think wins amongst those. Now, I do still have some feedback about some things I'd like to see improved after checking out this build for what was probably about 4 or 5 hours-ish total. One big thing for me was the kind of slidiness that the game has. Now, when you're first walking around and dodging, you don't really feel it, but with some weapons, it just feels like maybe the weapon pulls your character forward a little bit too much. Like if I go to do an aerial attack with the hammer, I have an idea of the distance I want to go, and I understand the distance on it, but it was really hard to get a feel for certain attacks and how far they would propel my character forward. I noticed this a little bit with the bladed Wagasa, but it didn't really bother me as much there because the weapon itself is so flexible. It was really the hammer I felt that on, and maybe a little bit the katana, especially the attack that kind of forces you to turn around as you swing through. I always felt like maybe that was a little too much distance on that. So reduce some of the distance on the attacks. And one thing I don't really have feedback on, but I need to see more of it to know how I really feel about, is the main gimmick of the karakuri. Now, at first, they seemed really cool, being able to create these barriers and create these vantage points. And I think that the more I get to play with it in, a full release or a longer build of the game, the more I'll have, I guess, opinions on it. But I found it really kind of unnatural for me to go out of the way to use these unless there were specific moments that they were designed for. And they do indeed do that. We get to see in this build that if you put 6 crates next to each other after you get far enough into the build itself, that it creates a wall. And if an enemy charges at the wall, they break it, bounce back, and they're vulnerable for a little bit of time. I, of course, also tested the dragon karakuri to see if you could use them in combat, noticing that you could attach a flying vine to an opponent, so you could ride it directly up to them, which is really cool. I also didn't get to try some of the other ones that are in the skill tree. There's like a lantern helicopter that also lets you to create a little bit of distance, or either create distance or gap close into the opponent. But I guess it's just not second nature for me to use the karakuri yet. So getting used to using them for aerial attacks, or even just for getting vantage points in the middle of a fight, I just want to have more time with it. So it's not even feedback yet, because it felt fine to use. Accessing it is a quick, hold a button and then press another button, a face button, or, go to your dragon karakuri, which takes a little bit more time, and maybe they could speed that up as well in case you want to use them in combat. But I just don't know fully if it works as well as it seems like it works, because it looks like it has a lot of potential. I just don't think I've gotten to see that potential yet. Healing in this build was also very, very accessible. I don't know if it was too accessible because I was just getting used to the monsters, and I was pretty grateful for the sheer amount of healing waters that I could find around and their general strength. But I do wonder if in the full game, if they want that much healing to be available, or if they plan to limit it in any capacity. Oh, what's one big thing I actually have feedback on? The way the game displays your stamina. So when you're using certain attacks or you're climbing, it does the kind of like half circle stamina bar next to your character, something that you probably see in other action adventure games or action RPGs, like when you're climbing a cliffside or something like that. But it's a little too shaky, so it's kind of hard to read. And as someone who's colorblind, when it falls below 50% and changes to what I have to assume is red, it almost just looks like it disappears to me. So as an accessibility change, I'd like to reduce the shaking on that, maybe even add the option for just a traditional stamina bar at the bottom of the screen. And also just, I guess, adjust the color scheme for it, because the whole green to red thing it didn't really work for me properly. And I think that in particular is going to be something a lot of people want to see improve. I also didn't get to do too much with in-combat items. I'm not really sure how much they are there, if there's any intention to have them, or if they're going to be focusing on just the combat itself. I'm kind of okay with that, but at the same time, I would like to see that kind of creativity. So I guess I don't really know where they're going to stand on that. But I was basically only using my wits, my healing salves, and my karakuri in combat, and nothing else on top of that. You can actually make food at the camp once you've set it up, and it's fairly simple. You can select basically like a meat, a vegetable, and a seasoning, and each of those has a different effect on your character. So I found it pretty easy to access, and it just gives you some basic stats, so you'll probably be using that pretty frequently. No feedback. I think that's fine. I'm not really too deep into that you need to create an in-depth cooking system. It just isn't for me. So that one's perfectly fine. The rest of the things I'd have feedback on, I feel like were more representative of the build we were playing, like the UI on the weapons and armor. I felt like that was very in development. Sometimes there were icons missing, so I think that says a lot about it. It was very hard to discern certain aspects about how I was actually improving my character, what the overall effect was. And on top of that, The damage numbers, maybe the font changed a little bit. It was a little hard to read those damage numbers in the midst of all of the chaos. And I do get a big satisfaction out of seeing a really big number. The few times it does happen when I was playing, you know what? I really, really enjoyed it. There's one clip in particular that I think I'll save it till now, of the end of one of my hunts when I'm using the bow. Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful right there. That's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. But I mean, all together, I had a lot of fun. I see a lot of potential, and I just want to see more because I'm on the edge of my seat now wanting to get back in, knowing full well I can't just go play it whenever I want. So I'll hopefully get to try it again before it releases. Hopefully EA and Koei Tecmo have me back, and I look forward to sharing that experience with you. So please stay tuned. Anyway, thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share. And if I get anything else on Wild Hearts, I'll be sure to post it to the channel. Thank you again, EA and Koei Tecmo, and please have me back. And I will see all of you in the next one. Until then, take care.